Hey, it's Janice from Ribeye Love, Confident Carnivore, and 2.5 Asians. Welcome back to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how I make my ribeye beef fat in the air fryer. Today's been a busy day and I've actually ended up fasting for 23.5 hours, so I am starving and I'm craving some fat. So I normally have a bunch of frozen ribeye fat triangles in my freezer, but this time I've actually run out. So what I'm going to use today is my actual ribeye steak that I have cryo sealed and defrosted from the fridge. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just cut open my ribeye. And we did use the Food Saver vacuum seal machine to go ahead and freeze our ribeyes. So this again is the Costco Prime untrimmed ribeye roast. And so what I'm going to do is actually cut off the fat triangle that you can see on this end here. So normally we would actually trim up the whole ribeye roast when we get it. We would slice it into about this thick, about just over an inch thick steaks, and then Aaron would usually cut off all these fat triangles for me, and I would freeze them in little, just throw a couple in a Ziploc bag so they don't all stick together. And then I would go ahead and have them ready for my breakfast when I'm ready to eat. But this time we were kind of rushing, and so I just cut up the steaks and then I threw it in the freezer. And so this was defrosted from that vacuum seal pack. But now I'm actually going to just throw this back in the fridge, and I'm going to slice this up, and then I'm going to go ahead and freeze it so that I can air fry it in the Ninja air fryer from frozen. And by freezing it and cutting it into strips, it makes sure that you're not going to have the whole thing render into fat. So it really just makes it that you're going to get these tasty crispy strips with more of a palatable texture, where they're crispy on the outside and they're not too gloppy on the inside. So you can see I've cut them up until about 1/4 inch thick strips. They're actually pretty mushy right now because the steak is defrosted. So I'm going to go ahead and actually, now you can see my air fryer is a little bit dirty, but I'm going to go ahead and lay out the strips of the beef fat onto this rack. So I've gone ahead and thrown the steak into the fridge to eat later. And as you can see, I'm just going to go ahead and easily lay out these kind of marbly beef and combination of fat strips into the little rack here. So just like that. And since they're actually defrosted, I'm going to go ahead and freeze them for maybe 10 minutes here so that they can get back to frozen. So I do find that I don't really think there's a problem if, either starting from the fat frozen and waiting it till it defrosts a hair to trim it in or cut it into these little 1/4 inch pieces, or like I just did where I took it off the steak from thawed and then I'm going to throw them back into the freezer to get them frozen again. I don't think it really makes a difference. I don't find that there's any issue with going between frozen and refrigerator temperature. And like I said, it does make it better when you air fry the fat from frozen so that it doesn't all just melt into rendered fat. So while my beef trimmings are refreezing back in the freezer right now, I figured I'd chat with you about what I usually do and when I usually eat those beef trimmings. So today it's actually about 2 p.m., which is super late for me to be starting with my first meal of the day, which is usually the fat, and then later I usually eat the rest of the ribeye steak. But because I fasted, like I said, for almost 24 hours here, I am craving some fat. So normally I would make my air fried beef fat at about 9 or 10 in the morning, depending on what my day is looking like. And then I would later follow it up with eating the ribeye steak, anywhere from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. It just really depends on my day. But today I am really feeling starting to get a little bit of low energy. So I feel like with fat, it really gives me a boost of energy, and it's kind of my primary fuel, whereas I see the steak as more of like my building blocks for my body. So I am excited about getting to eat some fat, even though it is later in the day today. And I'd like to also just point out that having a history of anxiety and depression and mood instability, I really do find that beef fat is actually what I would consider like nature's Prozac. I feel like it really keeps me in a very stable mood, and it's very satiating, and it gives me clear and calm energy. So I find that eating the fat separate from the actual protein part of the ribeye really keeps me grounded and very productive. So I really consider the fat as more of the fuel and also the mood stabilizer. So like I said, I'm super hungry right now, but I would say that I'm not hangry, which is a nice feature of carnivore, is that you do get pretty hungry at times, especially when you've been fasting for longer, but I feel like I never get as hangry and just really, really desperately hungry like I used to when I was either on the standard American diet or on a vegetarian diet. So we're back to the air fryer here, and you can see I just pulled the little rack out of the freezer. I let these slices of beef fat refreeze a little. They're not quite as tough as I'd like to freeze them from, so they might over render a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and just set the tray into the air fryer, and then I just shove it in there. And you can see this is a really small, compact Ninja air fryer. It's the 4-quart. So I go ahead and just turn on the on button, and then I usually turn up the temp to 400 degrees, and then I press start. It automatically defaults to 20 minutes, but I'm just gonna go ahead and lower the time down to 6 minutes. So there it goes, and I really love the air fryer because it doesn't make a lot of smoke. It doesn't set off your smoke alarm, so it's super convenient. It's as easy as using a microwave. So you can see I'm just gonna let it count down for those 6 minutes, and it just automatically stops, so I don't even have to stay in the same room. So I'm gonna go off and do a little bit of work while we're waiting. So while we're waiting for the beef fat to cook, I thought I would share a few thoughts on fat. So I grew up my entire life fearing fat, and not just plant fats, but I was also fearing animal fats in particular, because everybody says, oh, saturated fat, especially the fat in red meat, is going to kill you. But I've actually learned recently that animal fat is one of the most beneficial things that you can eat, especially if you're a woman and you're in your 40s and you're having adrenal fatigue, thyroid issues, hormonal challenges. We actually need fat, even more so than ever. But not just any fat, it definitely has to be animal fat. And you certainly shouldn't fear saturated fat. Since I've gone high fat over the past few months, and I've been eating this fat straight from the ribeye, like I showed you the piece that I'm cooking right now, that triangle, in addition to eating the prime Costco untrimmed ribeye, where it's extremely fatty. The fat is marbled throughout the meat, and there are pockets of fat throughout the cut. So I would definitely recommend doing it, because I have experienced huge gains. My thyroid has improved. I was hypothyroid, and that's definitely normalizing, and my hormones have improved. My cycles have normalized. I had actually tested to have the thyroid level of a menopausal woman. My doctor was concerned and wanted to put me on a thyroid medication because she said that my TSH level was that of a menopausal woman. And so since going high fat for only a few months, I'm actually doing so much better. I have so much more energy. My cycle is normal. I feel amazing. And so much for my earlier statement that the air fryer does not set off the smoke alarm, because it did in fact just set off the smoke alarm. But I think in general, it typically does not set off the smoke alarm. But I think I may have not drained the fat that has been collecting at the bottom of the fryer. So if you don't drain it out regularly, you could end up setting off the smoke alarm. So here we are. My beef trimmings have finished cooking in the air fryer. The little alarm just went off to say that the cooking was done, and it also simultaneously set off the smoke alarm. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull out this little handle, and you can get a good look at how tasty and crispy my beef fat is. So it's nice that it's in those little strips, because that means that it's mostly going to be crispy on the outer edges. So you're getting more surface area for that tasty texture. And you can see that probably a lot of the fat has actually rendered out, and so it is collecting at the bottom of this handy air fryer container. So I usually have to let it cool for quite a bit, because you can see that it's extremely hot. It's actually still making kind of a crackling noise there. So we'll give it another minute to cool down, but it looks delicious. So from here, I usually just use my tongs and I go ahead and collect my trimmings. I just throw them into a bowl or on a little plate. But you can see usually I end up with a few pieces that fall through the rack. And so sometimes I'll retrieve them like this. But there is going to be quite a bit of rendered fat that you can see. It's kind of glistening down there. That collects below this little rack. But you can actually pull this rack out, so when you do need to clean your air fryer, you can go ahead and readily pull that out. And what I typically do is I take the rendered fat, wait till it cools down a little so it doesn't melt something, and I'll usually just pour it into a bottle. I probably should be more environmental, but I actually had bought one crate of the plastic smaller Pellegrino bottles, and so I just have a whole heap of them, and I've just been basically pouring that rendered fat into the Pellegrino bottle to just sort of collect it. And you can see here's a sample of the Pellegrino bottle where I did pour the rendered fat into it. You do have to wait if you're going to pour it into a plastic bottle, because it will totally melt and crumple the bottle due to the high heat. So this is probably not the best way to use or dispose of my rendered beef fat, but for now I'm still figuring out how to use my tallow in a positive way. So when you're looking at the air fried beef fat, you'll notice it doesn't look like very much food. It looks kind of small and you think, oh, that's not really going to fill me up, but it's actually incredibly satiating. So I can eat this for breakfast and be feeling good for usually about 4 hours before I want to eat my fatty ribeye. So now is the moment of truth. I'm going to go ahead and eat my tasty air fried beef trimmings. So you can see there, looks pretty good. It's super, super delicious. So if you like fried food, or you used to like fried food, when you were back eating carbs, you're gonna love this air fried beef fat. And in fact, I bought the air fryer, that little 4-quart one, for about $90. I bought it strictly to cook my beef fat, because if you try to cook your beef fat in the pan, it's all going to render away. And if you try to eat it without over rendering it, it's really usually pretty gloppy, and it has this kind of unpleasant texture to eat it when it's pan fried. So I specifically bought that air fryer just so I could get this kind of crispy texture to make it easier to eat my fat. Every single time I eat it, I think it's like eating crack. And that's why Becky Niles calls it her beef crack, because it literally tastes so incredibly mouth-wateringly delicious. And I think that our tongues and our taste buds and our senses are designed to really crave fat. Because I think back to my vegetarian days, and I used to binge eat tortilla chips and potato chips, and I think it was literally just my body craving fat, but it didn't know what it was craving, so it would go towards like deep fried, things in plant oils. But ever since I've started eating beef fat, I feel amazing, because it's just, I feel like it's like nature's perfect fuel, and it's perfect Prozac. And the cool thing about these little strips is, as you saw when I started cutting up the triangle, it's kind of got some meat in there too. So it tastes like this kind of delicious, almost like you would think when you're eating like maybe like short ribs or something, where you're getting kind of like a big old piece of fat, but you're also getting some meat. So it's not like just eating pure fat, it's eating a little bit of the essence of delicious, tasty ribeye. It is so good. So I actually get excited in the morning to eat my beef fat, and it actually usually takes a lot less time because usually I have those triangles of the ribeye fat just frozen, and so I'll usually take one out and I literally let it defrost for like 10 minutes so that it's able to be cut with a knife, and then I slice it into those strips, and then I throw it straight into the air fryer without having to refreeze it. But it works either way. It's just nice to have a whole, I'll usually keep like a Tupperware with all of the triangles. Aaron will just buy the roast, cut up all the steaks, and then he'll cut all those little triangles off for me so that I have them for my breakfast. And I think, as I was saying earlier, that it really is important for women to have more fat. We seem to thrive, especially when we're perimenopausal and we start to get into our 40s and beyond. I think fat is absolutely essential. I was like a crazy person and super hormonal and super moody and just very unhappy before adding animal fat into my diet. And had I known this all along, I would have been so much better off. So I highly encourage you, if you find that it's hard for you to eat fat in other forms, like you don't like, kind of cooked in the pan, or you don't really like butter, you don't have a way to really add that extra fat, to go ahead and get yourself some suet or some beef trimmings, and then get the air fryer. I mean, it literally, I got it at Target for maybe, like, it was on sale for maybe $90 plus 5% off with my red card. And I think it really was worth it because it just enables you to eat the fat in a convenient way where, like I said, it's only 6 minutes to cook. And then you're also getting to eat it, really fast. Like, just like you would throw in a TV dinner into the microwave. You start to get really hungry, or you start to feel yourself getting into a bad mood, and just throw some fat in the air fryer, and then you're gonna be golden, because I do find that it enters your system pretty quickly. Like right now, I can already kind of feel, I'm feeling a little bit better, because like I said, I was getting really kind of low because I had fasted for almost 24 hours prior to making this. So I'm already feeling better. Like, I feel like it's kind of a little bit of a boost. And it really provides this kind of calm, stable, zen type of mood and energy where you'll be really productive and focused. So I do kind of consider it like everything that the pharmaceutical companies are trying to say that your antidepressants or other types of medications are going to help you with, but they actually don't deliver. So this is actually going to great mood stability for me and fix my hormones to keep my libido and everything going great, my cycles. It's going to help me across every dimension of my physiology and also my brain chemistry. So thanks for joining me for this episode on how I eat my tasty, fatty beef trimmings cooked in the air fryer. Have a great day. See you next time.